Battlefield 6 releases in 2 weeks, but there's a lot of important backstory about the game that you need to know, and I'm going to tell you the entire story before Battlefield 6 in under 15 minutes. In 2014, an unknown man escapes through the streets of New York, leaping onto a moving train while handcuffed. As he slides off the back of the train, he grabs on and kicks his way through a window, kicking an enemy straight in the chest. He steals his weapon and bites through the train car all the way up to the front of the train before he is slammed to the ground and confronted by a man with a revolver. The scene then shifts back to the CIA interrogation room, where Blackburn, handcuffed to a table, pleads with CIA agents, Agent Kovic and Agent Gordon, to heed his warnings about an impending terrorist attack involving a nuclear bomb. He begins recounting his journey 8 months earlier in Iraq, unaware that his actions in Battlefield 3 will directly lead to the prize of Pax Armada in 2027 and set the stage for the conflict in Battlefield 6. 8 months earlier in Iraqi Kurdistan, Sergeant Henry Blackburn and his Misfit 1-3 squad are dispatched to locate a missing US team investigating a potential IED in a market dominated by the People's Liberation and Resistance, the PLR, an Iranian paramilitary group that has spilled over from Iran into Iraq. And as the squad discovers the missing team, they are ambushed by PLR forces as they defend their position, and just before they get the upper hand, an earthquake ravages the city, burying much of it in ruins. A couple hours later, Blackburn awakens to see that the CIA asset gone rogue, Solomon, is dragging off one of his teammates before passing out again. Blackburn wakes up in the middle of the night amid chaos. Tuning in the radio reports of the earthquake crippling all US operations across the Iran-Iraq border, he is forced to use only his knife to fight his way back to his squad and try to extract via Osprey while also fighting off an overwhelming amount of forces from the PLR. However, as they finally extract, we cut back to a briefing. The PLR had launched a bold coup in Iran using the earthquake to overthrow the government and plunge the region into further instability. And in response to this, the US deploys 50,000 Marines for a full-scale invasion. Lieutenant Hawkins joins the fight, conducting daring air raids on enemy fighters over Iranian skies and precision strikes on the Mehrabad airport to cripple PLR capabilities in the region, paving the way for the US invasion. After successfully destroying the PLR's air capabilities, Blackburn's Misfit 1-3 squad is sent to Tehran for a battle damage assessment to make sure all the targets were destroyed and to capture the PLR leader, Farouk al-Bashir. And after getting a bead on his location, they discover that he's in a bank vault underground. As they finally get to the bank, there is believed to be al-Bashir's hideout. The squad uncovers a chilling secret. Farouk al-Bashir is not there, and the PLR has obtained 3 portable Russian nukes, with 2 of the 3 mysteriously missing. Upon checking nearby tables, they find maps of New York and Paris, and checking footage, they see that Farouk al-Bashir and Solomon are actively leaving with the nukes, but they are trapped underground in the bank vault. And overwhelmed by PLR forces, Misfit 1-3 calls for armor support from an M1 Abrams tank column led by Sergeant Jonathan Miller, which charges through the Covert Desert, smashing PLR tanks and overrunning a rocket battery encampment. However, when the tanks finally reach Tehran to aid in the squad's extraction with the last nuke, Miller is captured while awaiting reinforcements, and in a brutal turn, he is executed on camera by Solomon, the shadowy orchestrator of everything happening, and al-Bashir after a defiant monologue. And this is broadcast all over Iran. 2 days later, Misfit 1-3 has pressed the hunt through Tehran's war-torn streets for the leader of the PLR, clashing with patrols before storming a suspected apartment block hideout where Farouk al-Bashir is believed to be staying. As al-Bashir tries to flee in an SUV, Blackburn's gunfire causes it to crash, and the dying leader of the PLR realizes that Solomon betrayed him and confesses to a plot to detonate nukes in both Paris and New York. Intel from al-Bashir's phone points to arms dealer Amir Kafarov, complicit with Solomon and the supplier of the 2 suitcase nukes that were still missing. And a week later, Misfit 1-3 is racing to his villa on the Caspian Sea coast near Azerbaijan. However, they are ambushed en route, and the squad realizes that they're not fighting PLR troops, they're fighting Russian VDV troops. Pushing uphill, they confront waves of airborne forces, evading an Su-25 jet strike that claims the squad mates' lives, fracturing trust with their commanding officer Cole, who is insistent that they need to get to Amir Kafarov as soon as possible, and the lives of those dying don't matter. Meanwhile, Russian GRU agent Dmitry Dima Mayakovsky storms Kafarov's villa. As he interrogates the arms dealer, he tries to bribe him, to which Dima eventually just knocks him out. And Blackburn arrives to find Dima with an unconscious Kafarov. And as Dima discloses Solomon's scheme and urges cooperation between the 2 soldiers to avert a US-Russia war, with no politicians, just 2 men making a deal, the CEO, Cole, intervenes at gunpoint, threatening to shoot Dima. And in this moment, Blackburn is forced to kill his superior to protect Dima, setting off a chain of consequences that will directly tie into Battlefield 6 and we'll talk about that in a second. While Blackburn and his surviving squad mate Montez are hauled to New York for a CIA interrogation by agents Gordon and Kovic, Blackburn recounts his entire story. And while all of this is happening, Dima's team is racing to thwart the Paris nuke. They battle the PLR through offices, the Euronext stock exchange, and even clash with French police and GIGN amid the chaos. And as the team leader Vladimir gets shot, Dima finally gets to catch the carrier of the nuke. But as he opens the bag, it's revealed to be a decoy, and the real nuke explodes at Euronext, killing 80,000 people and exposing Dima and his teammate Kirill to lethal radiation. The CIA agents dismiss Blackburn's entire story, viewing Solomon as a trusted informant and blaming Russia for the attacks. So with war looming, Blackburn and Montez break free to stop the New York attack. Revealed as a handcuffed Marine from the outset, Blackburn leaps onto the subway train car, combats PLR hijackers with planted explosives, and confronts Solomon in the very front car. Seizing a detonator from hijackers, Blackburn triggers the charges, derailing the train, which starts a chase with Solomon through sewers and streets, where Montez joins in a police car, ending in a Times Square crash. As they get up, Solomon kills Montez, but Blackburn overpowers him in a brutal fight, beating him to death with a brick and securing the last nuke. Following all of this, radiation-stricken Dima pens a reflection on his and Blackburn's desperate bid to prevent Solomon from setting the world on fire. A knock at his door prompts him to grip a handgun. His fate uncertain for now. And following this, Blackburn is dishonorably discharged from the military, and as a result, he tries to set up a secret weapons facility for weapons research alongside Russia, which will come into play later on. With the War of 2014 concluded, US-Russia relations are already rocky. And going into this, in 2020, Chinese Admiral Chang decides to use this to his advantage by assassinating the Chinese pro-peace leader Jin Jae and framing it on the US. In response, the US sends Tombstone Squad of Staff Sergeant William Dunn, Sergeant Recker, Sergeant Pack Pikowski, and Kimball Irish Graves to find out what is really going on in China and why they're meeting with the Russian forces. The mission sees Tombstone Squad fighting off Russians as they try to get their extraction point on top of an old abandoned construction skyscraper. And as they get to the very top, an attack Russian helicopter downs the entire building, crashing their helicopter and collapsing debris on their squad leader, Staff Sergeant Dunn's leg. After they cut off his leg, they are forced to seal a civilian extract and drive down the road, but are quickly being pursued by the Russian helicopter. In a desperate moment, Drecker leans out the door, fires a grenade launcher, hits the helicopter and downs it, but unfortunately causes them to crash. And as they are sinking deeper into the sea, they realize that Staff Sergeant Dunn is trapped in the car and he won't be able to escape, and he is slowly bleeding out. And upon realizing this, Staff Sergeant Dunn hands Recker his pistol and tells him to shoot out the windows for the three of them to escape and to leave him behind. The irony, after they get back to their home base on the USS Valkyrie, they realize that the intel that they had was something the US already knew, making Dunn's death entirely futile. But following this, Captain Garrison, aboard the USS Valkyrie, briefs the team on Jin Jae's assassination. Now pinned on the US, Tombstone, with Recker as their leader per Dunn's dying wishes, covertly rescue VIPs Kovic, Hannah, and her husband from Shanghai. They first evacuate by a helicopter, and then a boat, and then an EMP blast disables everything in the city. Irish, the bleeding heart that he is, guides stranded refugees from the city of Shanghai to the Valkyrie for safety. Following this, the Valkyrie is been completely overrun, and they are forced to try to drop off some troops with the only other US ship in the area, the USS Titan, but they haven't heard any communication from it. And as they get closer, they see that the USS Titan is actually barely sitting on a coral reef and has been struck by a cruise missile. Once on board, CIA agent Kovic and Tombstone Squad fight through Chinese troops, extract the intel, and in a desperate boat race make it back to the USS Valkyrie. But as they're clearing off invaders from boarding the USS Valkyrie, Agent Kovic is shot and killed defending his position, restoring command back to Recker, who takes Tombstone Squad through the medical bay, where they find Hannah, who's fighting off Chinese troops. Rejoining with her, they fight their way back up to the bridge to save Captain Garrison and Hannah's husband from Chinese troops. And upon doing so, Captain Garrison makes a desperate final play. They are stuck between a Chinese fleet and the Chinese mainland, and so they have to do the one thing that they can think of to get free. Captain Garrison orders a full-out assault on a Chinese airfield. By destroying the Chinese fighters, the USS Valkyrie can make it to US-controlled space in the Suez Canal. And so this starts an epic invasion where US forces try to fight their way through Chinese forces, trying to fight through the mainland, and as they get to the bridge overlooking the airbase, a freight ship is picked up on a tidal wave and smashes through the bridge, sending them all flying into the ocean, before they swim up to a sewer system and finally make their way into the airbase. As they finally signal that the airbase is ready to be destroyed, they are hit by friendly fire, and in the chaos, it appears that Pak has died. Following this, Hannah comes rushing over along with Chinese troops, revealing her betrayal. She has betrayed Tombstone Squad and is secretly working for Admiral Chang. And as a result, Irish and Wrecker are sent to a prison in the Kunlun Mountains, where Wrecker wakes up to discover that his cellmate is a man stricken with radiation poisoning named Dima, who wants his help to escape. Together, the two start a prison riot, breaking out of the prison and along the way saving Irish. And as they get to the final door exiting, they run into Hannah along with other Chinese troops. And in this moment, she betrays the Chinese troops and kills them, revealing that she is actually a triple agent and that the only reason that she betrayed them was to keep her fake husband alive. And her fake husband is really Jin Jae, the politician who was supposed to be dead from an assassination. As they fight their way to take a cable car across the mountains to freedom, their cable car is attacked by a Russian helicopter, and as it slams into the ground, Dima is killed on impact, dying a free man quite poetically. But over the next 2 days, Tombstone, along with Hannah, is forced to fight their way through mountains, avoid patrols, and finally make their way back to a US base in the city of Kashgar. It's here they ally with US Major Greenland, who informs them a Russian tank column is pushing through the city to their position. So Tombstone, along with Hannah, goes up to the dam overlooking the city and destroys it, flooding the entire city and destroying the armored tank columns. This, in Major Greenland's eyes, buys them a ticket back to the USS Valkyrie. She skyhooks them back on board an AC-130, which flies to the Suez Canal and paradrops them along with other Marines on board of the USS Valkyrie, which is currently under attack by Admiral Chang's troops. As they fight their way through the ship, they run into Pak, who has somehow survived and is cussing more than usual, and together the three of them team up along with Hannah to fight their way to Captain Garrison in Jin Jae's position. And when they get there, they are overrun by Chinese forces. This is when Jin Jae reveals himself to all the Chinese troops, removing all the facial bandages and getting them to flip sides. But as a result, Admiral Chang, overhearing this on the radio that Jin Jae is really alive, starts firing on the USS Valkyrie in a desperate bid to kill them. Following this, Hannah, Wrecker, and Irish all rush out on a boat loaded with C4 to plant it at the base of the warship and blow it up and sink it in the middle of the Suez Canal, allowing the USS Valkyrie to escape and keep the war against Chinese Admiral Chang going. As they finally make it to the boat, they plant the charges and they use grappling guns to get up as high as they can above the ship away from the explosion. However, they reveal that the remote detonator is not working, and one of them has to manually detonate the charges. At this moment, the player can choose either Hannah or Irish to sacrifice themselves and detonate the charges. However, in the credits scene after the game, it's revealed that whoever you chose to sacrifice themselves really didn't die, so the sacrifice wasn't really sacrifice at all. But that ends the Battlefield 4 campaign. However, the story continues after the Battlefield 4 campaign with the War of 2020 in the DLCs. Despite campaign alliances, China and Russia are now at war over mainland sites like the Lancang Dam, satellite dishes, and the Golmud Railway, with the outcomes of these kind of still shrouded in mystery to this day. But after the events of the campaign, China and Russia are at war. The US is still at war with China, with US naval operations at the South China Sea targeting the Paracel Islands, where it's here that they seize Chinese installations amid island skirmishes at villages and resorts, using missiles to sink aircraft carriers, and the Russians intervene here, destroying a US carrier and executing its commander. While the weakening Chinese fleet paves the way for a mainland invasion, the PLA forces fortify the city, leading to the intense siege of Shanghai. However, after the siege of Shanghai, US and China make an uneasy alliance, but this results in Russia still being at war with both sides. And so China informs the US of an undercover Russian weapon facility in northern Siberia. The US uses this as an opportunity to force a truce between the two sides, and in the process are able to destroy the weapons facility. And it's revealed, after all the weapon facilities are destroyed, that they were actually created under Russian control by a private citizen named Blackburn. But following this, Blackburn's entire weapon structure is gone under. He is now actively working against the United States, kind of disingenuous by the American dream after he was dishonorably discharged for saving the world. And as a result, following the War of 2020, he establishes a private military company with considerable size and force. And it happens to line up with Pax Armada forming after 2020, because to this current day, we don't know who the owner of Pax Armada is. And based on what we know about the campaign story and post-campaign story from Battlefield 6, it appears Pax Armada doesn't get defeated during the campaign and they still exist, which hints that Blackburn might be responsible for Pax Armada in Battlefield 6 and technically be the main villain of Battlefield 6. If you like the video, subscribe for more, and until next time, I am IceBurgz. Stay frosty.